Somewhere in the past, a king made it illegal to sneeze during a royal ceremony. In another empire, a law required every citizen to carry a rock, just in case the ruler wanted a spontaneous construction project. And yes, there were places where cutting bread the wrong way was considered a crime punishable by exile. These laws weren't jokes, they were real, enforced, and feared. Today, we're stepping into a world where logic collapsed, power ruled, and history accidentally became comedy. These are the 50 strangest ancient laws ever recorded. In ancient Babylon, under the Code of Hammurabi, there was a strange law stating that if a builder constructed a house that collapsed and injured the owner's son, the builder's son would be executed instead. Justice wasn't based on logic, it was symbolic revenge. The law treated children as extensions of their parents, not individuals. To modern minds, it feels horrifying and absurd, yet back then it was seen as balance, a life for a life, even if the wrong person paid. In ancient Sparta, stealing food was perfectly legal, but getting caught stealing was a punishable offense. The Spartans believed the skill of stealth was more valuable than the food itself. If you stole successfully, you were praised. If you failed, you were beaten publicly. The law wasn't about justice. It was training. The idea was simple. Warriors must survive using skill, not entitlement. Today it sounds bizarre, but in Sparta, character was measured by your ability to steal silently. In ancient Egypt, it was illegal for anyone except the pharaoh to wear sandals with pointed, upward curving toes. The shape symbolized divine status, and wearing them without permission was considered an attempt to imitate a god. Punishment ranged from fines to mutilation. Egyptians believed fashion could disturb the cosmic order. Something as simple as a shoe became a spiritual boundary. The law reminds us that power often hides in the most unexpected details. In ancient Persia, under the Achaemenid Empire, speaking during royal meals was forbidden unless the king personally asked a question. Even laughter or throat clearing could be interpreted as disrespect. Silent dining wasn't etiquette, it was submission. Officials sat in fear, swallowing thoughts along with food. The law turned meals into ceremonies of control, where the greatest danger wasn't poison, it was a stray word. In ancient Athens, men who didn't attend public assemblies could be dragged to the voting grounds with ropes covered in red paint. Refusing participation was illegal because democracy depended on collective involvement. Ironically, the birthplace of democracy punished apathy like a crime. The law reveals something fascinating. Freedom wasn't optional, it was enforced. In ancient Rome, senators were forbidden from wearing excessively purple clothing because purple dye symbolized imperial authority. Only the emperor could wear a fully purple toga. Anyone else dressing too royally could be executed for treason. Fashion wasn't expression, it was hierarchy. Purple wasn't a color, it was a political warning. In ancient China, under various dynasties, citizens could be punished for writing characters incorrectly, especially those related to the emperor's name. A stroke missing or reversed wasn't considered a mistake, it was disrespect. Scholars wrote with trembling hands. The written word became a silent battlefield where ink could be fatal. In ancient Mesopotamia, there was a law stating that, if a woman insulted her husband publicly, her mouth would be filled with hot pitch as punishment. The rule enforced silence, not respect. The crime wasn't disrespect, it was female voice. The law shows how ancient societies weaponized discipline to maintain hierarchy. In ancient Japan, during the Heian period, Aristocrats were forbidden from attending public baths during certain lunar phases because authorities believed moon cycles affected spiritual purity. Bathing at the wrong time could curse the household. Hygiene wasn't private, it was regulated by superstition turned into law. In ancient Israel, farming fields was forbidden every 7th year under the sabbatical law. Citizens had to let land rest, believing the soil itself had a spirit requiring renewal. Those who planted or harvested risked punishment. Agriculture wasn't simply work, it was a conversation with the divine rhythms of nature. In ancient Assyria, a bizarre law required married women to wear veils in public, while slaves and prostitutes were forbidden from wearing them. If a woman of lower status was caught veiled, the punishment could be flogging, tar branding, or permanent shaving of her head. The veil wasn't modesty, it was hierarchy. The law turned fabric into social armor, separating privilege from humiliation. Today it sounds absurd, yet it reveals how societies use clothing not for comfort, but for control. In ancient Greece, under the city-state of Sybaris, roosters were banned from crowing before sunrise because wealthy nobles claimed early noise disrupted their sleep. Anyone owning a loud rooster could face fines or forced relocation. Sybaris was famous for extreme luxury, and even nature was expected to obey the elite. The law reminds us that when rulers live in excessive comfort, inconvenience becomes criminal. In ancient Rome, there was a rule stating that any soldier who fell asleep while on night guard duty could be executed, but the execution could legally be carried out by his fellow soldiers using stones, not weapons. The punishment wasn't about brutality, it was psychological unity. The military believed shared guilt built loyalty. Today the idea sounds horrifying, but in Rome even justice was strategy. In ancient China during the Qin dynasty, destroying a plow, axe, or any farming tool, even accidentally, could be treated as sabotage and punished harshly. The law existed because agriculture was considered the backbone of the empire. Tools were sacred, food was survival, and negligence was equated with treason. Something as small as a broken shovel became a national threat. In ancient Babylon, if a doctor performed surgery and the patient lost eyesight or died, the doctor could have his hands cut off. Medicine wasn't evaluated by expertise. It was judged by results. Healing was a gamble, and failure meant mutilation. Ironically, this law discouraged skilled practitioners and encouraged fear over innovation. Science became survival, not progress. In ancient Athens, bakers were forbidden from selling bread larger than the standard size, even during famine. Officials believed larger loaves would create unfair advantage or stir chaos. Bread wasn't food, it was regulated currency. Citizens watched their own hunger measured by government math. The law shows how simple resources become symbols of order. In ancient Rome, under Emperor Augustus, bachelors over a certain age were taxed for remaining unmarried. The law believed marriage produced citizens and loyalty. Unmarried men were labeled selfish and legally pressured to contribute to population growth. The government tried to legislate love, proving even personal relationships could become political expectation. In ancient Egypt, tomb builders were once forbidden from drinking water directly from the Nile, believing it spiritually belonged to the gods. Workers instead drank from clay vessels and were punished if caught drinking from the riverbank. The rule wasn't hygiene, it was ritual ownership. Even thirst required permission. In ancient Japan, breaking chopsticks during a royal feast could be considered bad omen and punishable by exile. Chopsticks symbolized precision and respect, and clumsiness was interpreted as spiritual insult. Dining wasn't casual, it was ceremony. Even slight mistakes were seen as cracks in discipline and honor. In ancient India, under certain kingdoms, washing clothes in palace water channels was illegal because washing was believed to wash away royal luck. Servants guarded fountains and rivers like treasure. Water wasn't just resource, it was power. The law reveals how superstition and authority often merged into unquestioned ritual. In ancient Rome, a strange law banned citizens from burying or cremating bodies within the city walls. The reasoning wasn't sanitary, it was symbolic. Romans believed death held spiritual contamination, and the city represented life, order, and sacred civilization. Anyone violating the rule faced fines or public punishment. Ironically, emperors often broke the law for themselves, building tombs inside Rome as monuments. The rule showed a timeless hypocrisy. Laws were for citizens, never for rulers. In ancient China, the Tang dynasty enforced a law preventing commoners from wearing bright yellow clothing. Yellow was reserved solely for the emperor because it symbolized the sun, heaven, and absolute authority. Wearing it, even accidentally, could be seen as treason or imitation of divine power. Clothing became a political boundary, reminding everyone that identity wasn't personal, it was assigned. The strangest part, even fabrics dyed incorrectly were confiscated, proving color could become crime. In ancient Greece, city of Megara, it was illegal to show grief at funerals too dramatically. Crying loudly, tearing clothing, or hiring mourners could lead to fines because leaders believed excessive sadness offended the gods. The government tried to regulate emotion itself. Families whispered their sorrow behind closed doors, learning that silence was safer than honesty. The law proved that even grief can be controlled when power fears passion. In ancient Egypt, a court official once wrote a law requiring that anyone speaking to the pharaoh must lower their head and never turn their back while leaving. If someone did, it could be seen as spiritual disrespect. The pharaoh was considered a living god, and interaction required ritual choreography. The rule transformed conversation into performance, showing how authority turns ordinary actions into sacred obedience. In ancient Israel, there was a peculiar law stating that if a man refused to marry his deceased brother's widow, the widow could publicly remove his sandal and spit near his feet as humiliation. The act symbolized rejecting family duty, and the ceremony became legal mockery. The punishment wasn't physical, it was reputation. Honor was a currency, and this ritual destroyed it instantly. In ancient Persia, if someone accidentally bumped into a drunk noble, the person could face severe punishment for dishonoring the blood of royalty. The law didn't protect safety, it protected ego. Nobles staggered through streets knowing even clumsiness was respected. The rule showed how hierarchy mattered more than logic. Dignity belonged to title, not behavior. In ancient Athens, actors were legally protected from physical harm during performances, yet mocking politicians on stage was completely allowed. Insulting a leader off stage could be treason. Insulting him publicly in theater was legal. The law treated theater as sacred truth, a tool for accountability. Paradoxically, comedy became the safest place to criticize power. Art held more permission than conversation. In ancient Japan, messengers carrying imperial commands were untouchable. Interfering with them, even accidentally, was punishable by death. Citizens cleared streets instantly as runners sprinted through cities with scrolls. The law wasn't about respect. It was about speed and unquestioned transmission of authority. A message wasn't ink and paper. It was power in motion. In ancient Rome, certain provinces had laws requiring citizens to cheer when the emperor's name was spoken publicly. Remaining silent was suspicious. Apathy meant disloyalty. People clapped not because they believed, but because silence was dangerous. The rule turned enthusiasm into survival. Loyalty wasn't earned, it was demanded. In ancient Korea, under the Goryeo dynasty, it was illegal to step on the palace shadows. Guards monitored walkways to ensure no one's foot touched the silhouette of royal architecture. The belief was spiritual. Shadows carried essence and dignity. The law turned sunlight into sacred territory, proving authority doesn't need walls, only belief. In ancient Mesopotamia, a strange law required bakers to stamp every loaf with a personal seal. If someone complained about taste, size, or quality, investigators could trace the bread back to the exact baker. If they were found guilty of cheating customers, they could lose a hand. Bread wasn't food. It was regulated trust. The law wasn't about flavor. It was about honesty in survival. In a world where famine lurked constantly, cheating bread was treated like attacking life itself. In ancient China, an emperor once issued a law forbidding officials from using umbrellas in his presence, even during heavy rain. If the ruler walked uncovered, everyone else was expected to endure the same weather. The policy wasn't fashion, it was hierarchy. Comfort wasn't a right, it was privilege granted by proximity to power. Those who disobeyed risked exile or execution. Something as innocent as shelter became an act of defiance. In ancient Rome, a rule stated that no citizen could bathe in public baths while wearing jewelry or perfume. Authorities believed luxury weakened Roman discipline and encouraged vanity. Guards patrolled bathhouses, checking for necklaces and scented oils. Ironically, emperors themselves bathed in marble pools filled with flowers and rose oils. The law revealed a timeless truth. Rulers often outlaw what they privately indulge in. In ancient Japan, during the Nara period, farmers were forbidden to sing while planting rice because officials believed singing distracted spirits responsible for crop growth. Silence was seen as respect for nature. Violators could face fines or ceremonial punishment. The rule wasn't agricultural science, it was spiritual choreography. Farming became ritual, and every movement had cosmic consequence. In ancient Greece, city of Sparta, laws restricted currency to oversized iron bars, dipped in vinegar, making them too heavy to carry and impossible to steal discreetly. The government believed wealth encouraged corruption, so they weaponized inconvenience. The currency served one purpose: prevent greed from moving faster than morality. Commerce didn't flow, it crawled under surveillance. In ancient Egypt, scribes were forbidden from writing the pharaoh's name on broken pottery or damaged papyrus because damaged objects could symbolically harm the ruler. Any written reference required pristine material. The law turned writing into ritual. Words weren't communication, they were extensions of divine status. Even a cracked surface was considered disrespect. In ancient Persia, under Darius I, it was illegal to lie, literally. Children were taught truthfulness as a state doctrine, and lying was treated as treason against the empire. Punishments ranged from public disgrace to execution. The irony? Records show Persian rulers themselves often used propaganda and deception to control territory. The law revealed a contradiction found in many empires. Truth was enforced on citizens, but optional for leaders. In ancient Rome, gladiators were banned from wearing metal armor shaped like Roman soldiers' equipment. The government feared the audience might begin admiring them more than the military. Entertainment could threaten loyalty. The law ensured glory belonged only to the army, not performers. Even spectacle was regulated to protect ego and hierarchy. In ancient China under Emperor Wu, a decree ordered citizens to stop using certain popular slang phrases, claiming they weakened national dignity. Officials patrolled markets listening for prohibited expressions. Language wasn't communication, it was ownership. Every word had to submit to the empire. The rule revealed how rulers fear casual speech, because casual speech often carries truth. In ancient Babylon, if a woman accused someone falsely, she could be drowned in a river to determine justice. If she survived, the gods were believed to have protected her innocence. If she drowned, the accusation was considered false. Law wasn't based on evidence. It was superstition disguised as fairness. Justice depended not on facts, but on fate. In ancient Egypt, musicians were forbidden from playing certain scales inside temples because those notes were believed to summon wandering spirits. Only priests could use them, and only during sacred rituals. If a performer accidentally played one publicly, they could face exile or purification punishment. Music wasn't expression. It was supernatural technology. The law suggests ancient civilizations didn't separate art from power. Sound itself was regulated like dangerous magic. In ancient China, emperors enforced a rule stating no rooster could crow within specific palace districts. Guards monitored farms carefully, and violators faced fines or relocation. The reasoning wasn't noise control, it was symbolism. The emperor represented the rising sun. No animal was allowed to challenge him by announcing dawn. A bird became political competition. The law shows how ego can reshape reality. In ancient Greece's city of Thebes, any citizen who trained in archery without state authorization could be punished because the government wanted to control military skill. Weapons weren't seen as tools. They were privilege. Training meant responsibility, and responsibility belonged only to those loyal to leadership. The law wasn't about safety. It was about preventing rebellion before it existed. In ancient Rome, marriage between social classes was often illegal. A senator could not marry a freedwoman or actress, even if both consented. Love wasn't relationship, it was political alignment. Breaking this rule could result in exile or forced annulment. The law turned marriage into a tool for preserving hierarchy, proving even emotions were subject to class structure. In ancient China, it was illegal to step on the emperor's written name, even by accident. Citizens avoided paper in streets and burned damaged writings to prevent dishonor. The law turned literacy into caution. Knowledge wasn't freedom, it was ceremony. Mistakes could be interpreted as treason. In ancient Persia, a law required every noble to host lavish feasts, even if they couldn't afford them, because the empire believed generosity measured virtue. People went bankrupt to avoid disgrace. Hospitality became obligation, not kindness. The law revealed a society where appearances mattered more than survival. In ancient Japan, some emperors banned stepping on fallen cherry blossoms because they represented spirits and impermanence. Guards swept roads to prevent disrespect. Nature wasn't scenery, it was philosophy. Flowers held spiritual hierarchy, and even footsteps required discipline. The law transformed spring into ritual. In ancient Rome under Tiberius, anyone kissing in public risked punishment because affection was seen as emotional disorder. Even married couples faced fines. The law viewed love as distraction from loyalty. The government tried to regulate hearts, not just bodies. In ancient Israel, farmers were forbidden from mixing seeds of different crops in the same field because it was believed to interfere with divine natural order. Agriculture became theology. Soil, plants, and growth followed spiritual instruction, not experimentation. The law suggests fear of chaos shaped farming more than science. In ancient China during the Zhou dynasty, nobles were forbidden from drinking alcoholic beverages before important ceremonies. Anyone caught doing so could lose rank or privileges. Alcohol wasn't just drink, it was spiritual pollution. Sobriety wasn't health, it was obedience. Ritual timing mattered more than enjoyment.